Okay, here we go. Here we go. Well, Bradley, thank you for coming on. Just very excited to have you here.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. It's first for me, so it's very exciting too.
Oh, very exciting. This is going to be new for both of us then. So, just to begin, I met Bradley back in Tel Aviv in 2019, and he had the honor, and I had the honor of him baptizing me and me being baptized by him. We built an incredible
Mm,
connection, and it's just great to have you on. Still keeping this dynamic going, and we'll
fantastic.
start with
Yeah.
you. Maybe a little bit of backstory where you want to begin.
I'm English, as you can hear by the accent. I grew up just near London in a place called Kingston upon Thames, which is a really nice town which has easy access to London. You can even take a boat trip into the city centre, so that's really fun. I've got a brother. He lives in America, actually up in Seattle, and he's an American citizen now. Been
Hmm.
there quite a long time. I can't remember how many years now. I'm married, and my wife is Norwegian, so I'm actually videoing this from Oslo in Norway. We have three children. As you can see, I'm in the kids' bedroom at the moment. My eldest is 15, and my daughter is 13, and my youngest son is 7 years old. Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And I had the privilege of meeting Bradley's family, and I mean Marit, his wife, incredible woman, and his kids, incredible characters,
hmm.
the whole cast. And it's so what
Yeah.
I like is seeing so much how the just kids how they resemble parents in some ways and some not. And if you know the parents
Hmm.
well, you can kind of see the parallel between them. I always find that exciting.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's always a privilege of being a parent, isn't it? You see kind of certain traits in your kids and their
Mm.
own personalities developing as well, and obviously traits from both parents. So that's always
Mm.
a fun dynamic.
Right. And what's incredible too is, I mean, maybe we'll segue this into kind of more or less career, but you guys have been in Israel for a while, and then obviously the
Mm,
UK and Norway. So pretty well traveled and experiencing
yes,
a lot of the globe. So yeah, we can segue with
yeah.
that, bridging that into what you're doing. I mean, if you're not watching the video, if you're on the podcast, um, Bradley is wearing his full cleric, uh, how would I say, apparel, and we can segue into that. It's excited to hear this.
Sure. Yeah. Well, actually, my background is, professionally speaking, is I trained as a teacher. So I worked well in England. We have a subject called religious education, which I know you don't have your side of the pond, as we say.
Hmm.
Fascinating subject to teach. So I taught mainly secondary, which I have to translate that. That is 11 to 18-year olds
Hmm.
in the school system. But I always felt really quite early, since I became a Christian, which I became a Christian when I was 21. So it's a big change for me that somehow I wanted to kind of serve kind of more full time in a church context. And that came later on in my life. And originally ordained as a deacon through the Church of England,
Hmm.
and then later on had the real privilege, unexpected, to be ordained as a priest through the Anglican Church of North America. So there's another connection with our cousins across the pond,
Hmm.
that my ordaining diocese or province is the Anglican Church of North America. And that happened 3.5 years ago as a
Hmm.
priest. Mm.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I've been serving as well before I moved out to Israel. I served in the Church of Norway here as what they call a catechist, which
Hmm.
is someone that works with the confirmation candidates that are going forward to confirmation. But really, in simple terms, it's a youth and family pastor.
Hmm.
Mm.
So then having
So
been
I have
there, and
a
then
mix between being a pastor and being a teacher. Yeah.
yeah, it's in a way they kind of are two in the same to some extent, where there's teaching and there's really bringing a community of people together and sharing a message, and
Mm.
at times even challenging them to think beyond their limits, which is kind of what we're trying to do here on Zeus with Bruce. Gonna
Yeah,
do a little
fantastic.
plug.
Yeah, yeah.
No, incredible, incredible. And so, what were some being in Israel? What were some because you were there for I think what was it 7 years I think or maybe I'm
Oh,
off
in total,
in
I was
total.
there before I was married. So that's I was in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, so mainly with the Palestinians. So that's just
Hmm.
under 2 years, and then I went back with my family, and we were there for 4 years.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's about nearly 6 years in total.
Yeah.
And as you can hear, I've lived what we say both sides of the Green Line amongst the
Mm,
Palestinians and the
right.
Israelis.
Right.
Mm.
Right. So with
Love
that,
the country, love the people. Mm.
mm. Yeah, and we were there together for about 10 months, which was the duration. And what
Mm,
were some of, just from your experience, a lot of the listeners, one don't even, I don't think could find Israel on a map, right? Couldn't find West Bank, aren't really
mm,
educated in this dynamic. But without getting too deep, what are some things that you would notice being someone who's been on both sides for over
mm.
2 years each? What are some things you pick up that people may not recognize or understand, or just little tidbits that would be helpful for painting a more nuanced picture of what's your experience and kind of just what was going on?
Yeah, it's a good question. Not so easy to answer in a few sentences, of course.
Yeah, take your
So I'm
time.
just giving you like
Yeah.
a little taster here. Living amongst the Palestinians was quite awesome, to be honest. So they're amazing, amazing people, so full of life, so full of passion, love to dance, very
Mm,
hospitable people, and I found them a real joy to be with, of course, with their own story and the pain of that story, which is enters
mm,
into the conflict. And then, of course, the Israelis, and that's a completely mixed bag as well, from different backgrounds, nationalities, but fascinating people. I just love there's a real friendliness, but a directness as well with the kind of Israeli culture that, I mean,
right.
a lot of people can find, oh, but I kind of enjoyed that you knew where you
Mm,
stood with people,
right.
for better and for worse sometimes. But in the
Mm,
whole, I think it was very refreshing, especially being an Englishman and coming from a culture that tends not to express very clearly
mm,
what they think and feel. So I like that about the Israeli culture. And of course, as you could probably gather, I've got a real heart for both communities and
mm,
have a
mm,
real desire to see some form of reconciliation,
right.
hopefully in the nearer future rather than the long term future.
Mm,
Mm.
no, very well said. And what's powerful is I remember when we had graduated, we each had because it was done through virtual, and we each had our
Mm.
name and a picture, our name, and a quote. And I don't remember yours
Yeah.
verbatim, but it was very similar. Where it was about peacemakers and like
Yes.
blessed are they, and they're going out into the world.
Yeah.
And it really resonates
Yeah.
with what you're saying and trying to connect with
Mm.
both sides and just finding a way for middle ground and just having the aspiration for some sense of reconciliation that can happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean that the scripture is out of a very famous sermon that Jesus did called the
Mm,
Sermon of the Mount,
mm,
and it's part of what's called the Beatitudes, kind of the blessings, if you like, that he wants to give to people, or actually to acknowledge in people. That's more accurate to say. Blessed
mm,
are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God.
mm,
And I suppose, and that's another story. That's a journey that I've been on.
right.
That sense of what God has done in my heart, and the desire to see peace for
Mm,
sure, absolutely, but also recognizing the complexity of the history and of the peoples and of the situation, and if in some little way I can be some sort of bridge builder, then for me that's why it's a wonderful calling to have.
no, powerful. And even in a context that it's not just, let's say, Israelis and Palestinians, just even other groups, right? And finding ways that you can
Mm.
bridge the gap, right? Like within with Ireland, right? Like the Protestants and this whole dynamic as well.
Yeah,
And finding that.
conflict's all over the place, isn't
It's
it?
all
I
over the
mean,
place.
it's but within our own lives, within our
Right,
families, within our communities, within our
right,
nations, and amongst nations, etc., amongst
right, right.
people groups. So I think to somehow get tools. I mean, you have to accept that conflict is a reality, not to be in
Mm,
denial, but also trying to find tools and a desire to build bridges to seek forms of reconciliation, and that's
mm,
obviously another big subject. But that
yeah.
absolutely, this is the subject that will never, for this side of the second coming of Jesus, that's not going to go
Oh
away. We
man.
need to be active
Right.
active in that.
No, absolutely. So then this would segue very well into the next sort of topic is within this field, what has been maybe a failure on your end that you've realized, or just that in life in general, what's something that you were able to take away specifically during this career, but overall, just something that you were able to reflect on that was a failure or a lesson? And what did you learn from it? What was something you were able to pick up?
Yeah, yeah, because Bruce gave me the questions beforehand, so I was
Mm,
reflecting on this, and I don't know about you, but sometimes I find it very intriguing that when we apply for a job, for example, one of the things that we have to do is to present our CV or resume,
mm,
as you guys say, and we paint the picture of who we are, what we want to paint and portray. And it would be fascinating, wouldn't it, if we could also hand in our CV of failures. These are CV of successes
Oh,
and our
that's
CV
great.
of failures. And I was thinking, oh man, what I've got so many failures in my life, things that I kind of messed up with. But I was one that I was thinking that was quite influential in my life was back when I was 18 years old. And in the English system, we have what called advanced levels, which is the education take from 16 to 18. And we specialize very early, and you normally take 2 or 3, maybe even 4 A levels. I took 2 A levels, which are your final exams, and the subjects were history and art. And the mock exams, I was predicted to get sort of C, B, kind of quite a reasonable grade. And when it came to the final exams, it's the make or break, that's everything depends on that. I actually failed my history exam.
Oh no.
And I got the lowest grade possible in my art exam. It was barely like the equivalent of a very basic qualification. And I was devastated. You can imagine you've worked all this time, and it's not like at that time, it was nothing to do with coursework. It was all 100% on the final exam. What did I have to show was a failure and a very low grade. And yeah, I mean, for sure, that's one of my biggest failures. And it really affected me, obviously in the short term, but in the longer term, that's what did I do? How did I manage to mess that up? So that's definitely. And I know the next question could be, what did I learn from that? Well, I think, or if I was to go back, I think what I would learn from that is I would have gone back to school or tried again. I would have accept the failure. But then I needed to do something, try again. And that's it. But actually, what I chose to do at that young age was I chose to, in one sense, just ignore it and deny it and just do something else. And the problem is that leaves a sense of unfinished business in your life and in your heart. So if I was to go back in time, I would say, Bradley, look, I know it's really hard. I know that you're really disappointed. This is not what you expected. But just take another half a year and sit that exam again, so you can have I should have got a much better grade, and I know why I messed up. That's another question. But just to go back and just, in a sense, overcome the failure and work through the failure.
And something spot on that you said. I was thinking, okay, he's going to say this, and you did, was just the part of denial. And when something happens, we, especially in a case like this, we see it and think, it's a fluke, or it was someone else, and something like that. And although these things can influence it, it really does come down to the decision we make and your ability to be reflective and saying, okay, what did I do wrong here? What could I have done better? And a cool part that you said was leaving the unfinished business. Because a lot of times, when you shortchange it or you do something and you could have done better, you're going to have that, right? But when you give it your all and you are reflective and hold yourself accountable, you're able to move forward more effectively.
Yeah, and of course, one of the keys is trying to learn from mistakes, for sure, and learning how I can better deal with the mistakes and what I can do about that. And actually, of course, that's the goal, is to be stronger for it. And that's coming on to some other questions I know that you have coming up.
No, absolutely. Well, what's funny is you were talking about history, right? So you're talking about the history, the one that you did. So kind of next idea I like to ask this one here is coffee with a historical figure, or I'll try to reach out more to you, maybe a cup of tea with a historical figure. Maybe whatever's the medium, that connects.
A nice English cup of tea.
Nice English cup of tea.
Yeah, I do drink tea every day. I drink coffee when my wife's around, but I enjoy my cups of English tea. That's true. Even now, having been away from England for over 20 years or so. So yeah, the historical figure. Well, I am going to return to England, and it's a character who fascinates me, and that's Winston Churchill. An absolutely fascinating character, and I did a seminar on him, on leadership, in the previous course, and just really learning about this character who was in many ways larger than life, but he was so influential, so important for us to get through the Second World War, and the leadership that he provided for the English people. But he was a flawed character as well, and that's what I like about this is learning that he's got so many good points and inspirational inspirational, I said sermons. He's not a preacher. They're sermonic like, but his speeches and just the way he was sort of inspiring people and his leadership that we needed during the Second World War. But he had his flaws as well, and his challenges and his failures. And just, I would love to sit with him and talk about how did he kind of cope with. Now, they look back, for example, and they analyze Churchill, and they see that probably he had ADHD, for example, which of course that's a modern diagnosis in regard to Churchill. But he certainly had all the kind of characteristics of an ADHDer. And I would just love to sort of sit with him and talk, how did he kind of manage that and work through his failures. And that really, for me, again, is going to be a recurrent theme for this talk, is that how do you work through your failures? How do you turn them, in a sense, to good, to strengthen you? And the perseverance that you can get if you really confront failure and work it through, and that will strengthen you for the future. And for sure, Winston Churchill was in that category.
Right. And what's powerful is having that resilience and being able to develop it. But then again, if we go back, it's the state of denial that it's so easy to find ourselves in, and not accepting the responsibility or anything within that dynamic, and finding a way to be self-reflective and then assess what needs to be done. And Winston Churchill, incredible example of doing that, because as we both know, and listeners, if they have some of the history down, is incredible challenges, but persevered. And really, without him, it would have been a tough situation that would have unfolded big time.
Yeah,
exciting,
definitely.
No, I mean that's a great first person to think of. That's quite good. So with the history of this, it's also trying to share with listeners here what are, for yourself, things that have influenced you, but specifically, let's say the options we have here: a book or a movie or a podcast, that has maybe influenced you heavily, lightly, but just that you would recommend. It could be one of each, it could be three of one, so as you like.
Okay. Well, the book, this thing around my collar obviously gives it away what I am, in the sense
Would
priest.
you mind, Bradley, explaining that to some people who may not know what it is, just to give a quick background?
Sure. Yeah. It's well, as I've mentioned, I'm ordained through the Anglican tradition, which are, well, if you're talking as a Protestant, I'm going to get all terminology. I'm sorry. You would think of it as the Church of England that happened with King Henri VIII, and that's a whole history lesson. But really, I identify as it's rooted in the original church 2,000 years ago, and there's certain traditions, histories that have just passed on through generations, and of course one of these, was that in a way it's like a uniform, isn't it? It's just a recognition of what you do as a profession as well. But I like to think it's a little bit more than that it's something, it recognizes who you are. But that I could unpack that, but let's not do that today. But let me focus on this book, because actually I wasn't brought up as a Christian. I had no background in this except for a funeral, maybe a wedding. That was my contact with Christianity. So brought up in a very kind of what we might call a secular home. And so when I recommend a book, kind of like it's the giveaway, I would recommend the Bible. Now, for someone like me who really hadn't read the Bible, and then the first time in actually opening the pages of the Bible, it just blew my mind. I was absolutely, wow, this is incredible stories. Now, technically, of course, the Bible is one book. It's a library of books, so you can kind of pick out perhaps which book of the Bible you like, but just this kind of encounter, and that's with the Bible. And it's a book of mystery, and it's certainly not always easy to understand, but when you get to the New Testament especially, and the stories about the life of Jesus, it's like, wow. And so I'm continually fascinated by this character who both attracts me to him, and sometimes I'm repelled by the kind of the strength of what he says, but I can't get, I'm a follower, 100% card follower of this guy called Jesus, or in Hebrew, Yeshua. And so for sure, if you've not read it, and whatever your background, please do read this, especially one of the books of the New Testament, or the Gospels especially, and just be confronted with this person who has changed so many people's lives, and for sure influenced how history has unfolded from that time on. So I would like, Yeah, go on.
No, I
Go on.
just incredible book that if you haven't heard of it, it's been around for a while, so I'm sure you can find it everywhere. It's a little bit longer, but worth the read if you get the chance. And even if you're not a believer or anything like that, you can still find
Yeah.
so much value in just understanding a lot of references that are made in society and groups and cultures. It's a nice way to kind of build that sort of bridge for yourself to kind of new way of just thinking and how people
Mm.
resonate with this
Yeah.
message quite a bit.
So probably if I was to advise you, if you've never picked up a Bible before, just read perhaps Luke's Gospel, maybe Matthew's Gospel, as
Right.
a good starter. Okay.
And that's where we
Can
had
I recommend?
yeah.
Can I recommend another book, or it's
Yeah, no,
kind
go
of
ahead. Yeah,
connected
so it's
to
just a handful to get us going. Go ahead.
there's one particular author who I've been very influenced by in my life and generally, and it's a guy called it's a Roman Catholic priest called Henri Nouwen.
Hmm. How do
He's
you
no
spell
he's
Nouwen?
dead now, but
Henry.
we can Nouwen.
We'll
Yeah, I
we'll put it
probably
there.
pronounced it wrong where I've written it down somewhere. Um,
I'll put the link at the
uh,
bottom
yeah,
in the
yeah,
description.
maybe it's
Okay.
yeah, we maybe could do it later. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no worries.
and actually, to be honest, all his books are mind-boggling and fascinating. He's trained in psychology, so he bridges psychology and spirituality, which I really like. So he's really in touch with, well, his theme, if I could say theme, is the wounded healer. The
Hmm.
idea that we're all broken people, that we're all vulnerable, that we all have our failures and our hurts and the things that have not gone completely right in how we would like it in life. And naturally, we carry that kind of brokenness. But the real question is, how do we deal with that?
Hmm.
And there's perhaps one book, it's called The Return of the Prodigal Son. Wonderful story about the Bible. And it's this story of this young man who goes out into the world, lives life to the full, and then gets to a place of just, oh, I'm so broken. And he returns back to his father. And Henri Nouwen just talks about this in such a rich and a deep way, this idea of the son that's been returning back to his father, and his father, rather than rejecting him, just embraces him.
Hmm.
And it's just this picture of the embrace of the father's unconditional love. You know, he knows the son has sinned, he's broken, he's gone away from the family home, but he just welcomes him home. And if really Henri Nouwen is just a master of talking through wounds and brokenness and how God can turn those around for good.
Right. Powerful
So
story, this
yeah.
one. Yeah, and
Mm,
it's also if you look at this perspective of the father as well, you have the son who leaves, and the father wants the son to have freedom and abundance, but then the father is also hurt, right? To some extent, where's my son going? What's happening?
mm,
And I don't know if he mentions it, but it also takes some sense of maybe humility or just humbleness to be welcoming of the son back, regardless of
mm.
the damage, let's say, that was done beforehand, or the
Yes,
emotions that
yeah.
are there that resonated and sat.
Of course, it's a parable, so it's a
Of course,
fictitious
yeah.
story that Jesus
Mhm.
tells, and I mean, there's many interpretations, but a key interpretation, of course, is the idea that God is our Father, and that
Mm,
we can return to Him, and He's not going to reject us and turn us away. To, oh, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? He just embraces us, and welcomes us back home.
mm. Powerful. Yeah, definitely recommend Prodigal Son, just an incredibly cool concept. And like you said, many different
Mm,
interpretations and ways to go about how you see it. But the essence is that, right? It's the child, or even if it's any kind of relationship, let's say, whether it's not like the son, but even a daughter, anything like that. It's coming back and
yeah,
having open arms, some sense not of
yeah.
forgiveness, but of being welcomed back, which people are fearful
Mm.
of. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that you do something bad that you need to do something to repent for whatever you did, and if you don't, then you're an outcast, you're not welcome. But the story of the prodigal son seems to illustrate the opposite from that.
Yeah, just the welcome that the father has for his children to return home.
Incredible. Okay, two great books. Definitely
Or
I'm gonna
movie.
check it
Like,
out.
oh, I got to put
Yeah,
a
or a
movie in
movie
there
or a
because
podcast, or yeah,
yeah.
whatever you're
Okay,
feeling.
I realised I actually wrote down three movies that I
Oh
love,
yeah, let's
and
do
it's
it. We,
kind of
we
like,
got
oh
time. We got time.
gosh, I don't have well, and I realised I'm a bit of a sci-fi slash fantasy fan
Hey,
because I
I'm
wrote
with
down
you.
The Matrix,
Oh,
The Lord of the Rings,
ah.
And then my third one, which I just want to highlight maybe, is the Time Machine. And now I'm a bit older than some of the viewers, so I'm talking about the 1960 version of the Time Machine, which is the film based upon the book H.G. Wells. But I just love this concept of the time machine and traveling back to certain periods, and it just fired my imagination. I can still see the images of this film
Did you
when I
say
talk about it in my
H.G.
head.
Wells? Did you see? Because I think actually I have this book somewhere. Hold on.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, there you
Oh,
go.
let me go quick. I want to see what. Oh
Yeah.
no,
So
we actually
he's
do.
been distracted. The host has just dashed off now.
I just stopped,
Have
guys.
you
Because
got?
H.G. Wells right here.
Yeah.
Hold on. Can I pull it out? It's funny because like, no one really recommends this quite a bit. Yeah, here we go. This one, yeah.
Oh yeah. The time. Yeah, it's in reverse of my screen, but
Ah,
yeah. So
that's powerful.
so
Okay,
I
well, tell us more about this one.
yeah I just love this idea that he went into time, and you could. I mean, I love reading my kids' books about anything to do with time machines, and someone goes back to the time of the Egyptians or the
Mm-hmm.
time of Jesus or wherever it is, and all my kind of Netflix stuff is anything to do with time travel. I get kind of carried away. So yeah, just a fascination with the idea of traveling through time and
Right.
meeting different cultures and histories and so on and so forth.
So with in Lord of the Rings, incredible trilogy, and they're taking us way back,
Yeah.
fictitious land as well. But then a very powerful one, which there's actually the fourth installment coming out on Christmas, is The Matrix.
Oh.
I don't know if you heard about this, Bradley,
Oh,
but
it's no, I hadn't.
yeah,
No,
it's
I
called
wasn't
Matrix.
as keen on the second and the third film. I mean, they're okay as a trilogy,
Yeah.
but the first one was this
Is
pioneer, and I saw it obviously when
yeah,
it came out, and it
yep.
just blew your mind. And I loved the idea that that they deal with existential questions of life, the kind of deep questions of life, and they put this in a science fiction format. And this idea of Neil as this kind of messiah-like figure who
Right.
he
Yep.
doesn't understand he's a messiah-like figure. Then this scene, mind-blowing scene in the film when he dies, they shoot him. You think that's the end of the story. It's over. And then all of a sudden you get this. He kind of resurrects back to life, and you get all these movements. And here
Yeah.
he is, and then they're trying to kill him, and he's just all the bullets are just being
Oof.
deflected because now he's resurrected. He's kind of this new. This is what it was all prophesied about in the oracles, as the film says,
Mm.
that he would come as this, and he would be the one that would save the day.
Mm.
And
Powerful.
so I just love
Very
these
powerful.
kind of deeper. There's there's something deep within our psyche where there's the mythical stories that we keep coming back to again and again and again. And this is one of those stories, this idea there must be more to life than death. There must be, is there something that happens after death? And it's just this story that in its modern format, it's not so modern now, I know, the Matrix, but it was able to portray this, in a way, a yearning of the heart
Mm.
that I would suggest that we all have, whether it be conscious or a more deeper subconscious level.
Exactly. Yeah. And the parallel with the story of Christ, and there are definitely other ways to take it and interpret it. And for myself, I'd seen this movie because it came out in 2000, 1999. It was those 3 or 4 years. It was early 2000s, late 1990s.
Uh,
I was only 5 at the time, so I did wait to see it until I was about 10 or 12.
right. Yeah.
And no, I mean, I
Okay.
res it. I love that series, that movie, the next one that's coming out.
Uh,
But a lot of times it's
ah,
we're operating in a place where we're just doing something very cyclical, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just for myself, and one of the premises of the show overall is to to of course learn new things, but to question old beliefs. Because a lot of the times we
mm,
didn't choose those beliefs, and we're operating in a way that we believe we have free will, autonomy, and independence, which isn't necessarily the case. For myself, you would have to be informed of the different options and to know why you're doing what you're doing in order to actually be this autonomous, two-legged animal that's roaming the earth, right? Having that ability to do that. And now, why Lord of the Rings? That's I'm curious
yeah,
about.
I
Yeah.
can get a bridge there because
Yeah.
Tolkien was a Roman Catholic Christian. He was, these books are laden with symbolism, layers and layers and layers. And one of the, there's I hadn't prepared this, but he wrote a book, Tolkien, about fairy tales and the power and the importance of fairy tales. And he touches upon in this book, kind of more analytically, how there is this underlying story that we have, that we've inherited, that seems to be so generational, that and this is what fairy tales are about, this idea of, good overcoming evil, the hero in the story that will lead the people, and so on and so forth. These stories that undergird all our fairy tales, because there's a deeper part in our lives that yearns for these things. And of course, the Lord of the Rings, at many levels, is based upon the gospel stories. But you have to. It's not like C.S. Lewis, who was his friend and professor at the Oxford University, who wrote all the Narnia series. His portrayals are much more easier to grasp within that. But Tolkien had a much more multi-layered dimension to it, and it's great visually, isn't it, to just look at the films? But I just love the different characters and the idea of the good and evil in battle with each other, and the power of the ring, and what does he do in the end? He has to get rid of this ring because it will overtake him. And there's more that we could say. But
No, absolutely. We could do a whole
yeah.
thing on that. I mean, especially maybe I should just do a podcast on movies. There's so many out there. Now, I'm
and
curious.
how they can help us. Yeah.
I mean, they really can. I mean, they're mediums to
Yeah.
tell stories that are not new. It's just a story and idea that we can definitely derive a lot of value from. Now, I'm always curious though, what do you see Gandalf's role in that movie? Right? I mean, of course, he was significant and he was an all-powerful wizard. But if we had to create some kind of parallel or significance or symbolism out of that context, what do we see his role? Because he also does sacrifice himself, right, to kill the beast, to kill the enemy. So, what do we see with his role in that?
Yeah, and I think, as I said, it's not so easy to typecast each role with a particular character. So I think there's a multi-layered and different elements, like a jigsaw, that fits together. So of course, the idea of sacrifice, that becomes quite Messiah-like, and this idea of Gandalf the White, that he appears as this resurrected, more powerful wizard. So for sure, that has its. You can know where that kind of comes from, but I don't think it's as straightforward as saying, like, C.S. Lewis's The Narnia stories, the lion is most clearly the Christ. Yes, we know that
100%. If someone cannot see
the
that,
Lion of Judah. It's easier to understand. You don't
yes.
get that with Tolkien, and there's charm, there's strength. Now I'm comparing them. They were friends. They played off each other, and they still influence us immensely, these two authors and their stories. But I love the C.S. Lewis. I hated to read. I had learning difficulties when I was younger, and the librarian said, "But there's one book that you must read," and it was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. And I actually read the book. I read a book for the first time from
No
page to
way. That's
page.
funny.
It just captivated me. So there, it kind of. This is before I was Christian. I had no idea what the kind of layers of symbolism, but it shows you there's something about the story, the narrative, that captures our emotion, our imagination, yes, but also something within our hearts, and how that's portrayed. Of course, Lewis, I didn't know we were going to talk so much about Lewis and Tolkien, but they just approach it in a slightly different way.
No, powerful. And I love how you mentioned the first book that you were recommended, because I remember mine, and I used to not be a reader at all. And the first one that I was recommended by a librarian, I believe, was the first Harry Potter book. I can't remember the name. I should. But just that first one, like the power of the narrative and storytelling, and this young boy who is neglected, or he was. I mean, this is a story that many children and even adults can resonate with.
Yes.
And for myself, I'm one of four, and I felt very loved. Just you can connect with it a little bit, and the power of the storytelling there is just powerful. I mean, I will say some of the best works of fiction come from the UK. I mean, you guys are crushing it. You guys have some incredible authors, and you guys are really leaving a mark. No,
we haven't even spoken about Shakespeare, of course, but that's another story.
Man. Well, I mean, I hope that if you're listening to this, you should know who he is. If not, Google Shakespeare and have a very good time. We'll say that. Let's look at the next one. We got podcast, and of course,
A podcast, yeah.
aside from this one, no need to mention it. But if there is some, because some people don't listen to podcasts as much, or that's just not their medium. It could even be an interview that you've listened to, or just a recording of someone and something like that. What's maybe one or two you would recommend that have resonated with
Yeah, I have to say, obviously, I'm a little bit more. I have a few more years on you, Bruce. So I'm this
you?
modern
Just a few,
technology.
just a few.
I'm just catching up. So podcast has been fairly recent thing that I've discovered in my life. Um, so, but there is one that I've just started to listen to now, which is actually it's by a Bible teacher who absolutely fascinates me. He's called Tim Mackie.
Tim
Now,
Mackie.
Tim Mackie, for those that haven't come across him, he actually, with a friend of his, he's done a whole animation series of short videos on YouTube. He's a YouTuber where he does sort of 3 to 6 minute videos about certain themes in the Bible, and they're fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And now he's also has a podcast where, and I love the theme. It's called "Exploring My Strange Bible," and he's just such an easy guy to listen to. I can just kind of eat him up all the time. The words that he says, he's so kind of laid back. Now, where is he from? I should remember that. He's from he's from, where are we? The west coast of America. Oh, I
Like
can't remember.
California, Washington.
He's south of Washington. Oh,
Okay,
anyway.
Wyoming,
Oh,
Oregon,
I,
Oregon,
I,
Oregon,
or
Oregon.
I think it might be
I
Oregon.
should know
Anyway,
this
around
as
that
well. I
area.
mean,
Anyway,
I'm American. What am I doing?
sorry, Tim Mackie, if I forgot where you're located, but that's not the really part. I just love his kind of. He's just really laid back, and he's kind of like really, really down to earth, and he's very real. Look, this is a strange book, and I don't always understand it. Yet he calls himself a card carrying Bible nerd. It's like, and I identify with that. It's like I don't always understand this book, but I keep coming back to it again and again and again, and it fascinates me. It certainly encourages me. It gives me hope, and all of these different things. And if you really want, I think, a cracking Bible teacher, he's definitely worth exploring. So that's Tim Mackie,
This Tim
Exploring
Mackie,
My Strange Bible.
explain my stream. Okay, I'll put a link for that down. And the C
And
Maker.
he's part of the Bible Project. He did the Bible Project
Okay.
videos, as
Because
I said.
wait, so these are
Yeah.
some of the YouTube videos. They're like you mentioned, short clips, and they're cartoons.
Yes.
Okay, my
Yeah, kind of
brother, or
animations, and
animation, we could
so
say. Yeah,
yeah.
animation's a better way to put it. And yeah, I think I did see a couple of them. My brother had sent
Yeah,
them
I
to
think
me.
when I
Yeah,
was teaching you, I sent links to that. So it's the
yeah.
Bible
Okay.
Project. They're just really, it's now it's really up to date. Kind of this is what everyone listens to, isn't it? YouTube, and
Mm.
he's kind of they've what did I say? They've connected with that. I nearly said market. It is a market, but just that way that people listen to things today, like the podcast. That it's just a form of communication, which is really, I think, is really mastered
Right.
in a beautiful way. And it's about the most fascinating book that's influenced history, isn't it?
Yeah,
So I think
it's
for me that's a win-win.
no, I mean, yeah, like you're saying, the different form of communication, the medium, and even with
Yeah,
books, I mean, there's many reasons why we're not going to film and different mediums like that. But it's really you're getting information and just what works well with the individual. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, there's still
definitely.
so much value in reading, 100%. It's been shown to help slow the onset of Alzheimer's and just keep your mind more sharp.
Mm,
Stuff like it's just important to remember that. But having these mediums with YouTube and podcasts,
yeah,
and especially with technology and how, I mean, seeing kids who are or babies and kids who are 1, 2, 3 using these devices, you think, oh no, they're being
yeah,
hijacked, their brains, and it's going to be incredibly tough to prevent that. So if we're finding
mm,
a way to, while they're using it to show stuff like this and just mediums of development, it's
yeah,
going to be powerful, and even for adults
yeah.
and all dynamics.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a 7-year-old, and he's on YouTube, and some of it is just, I think, to be honest, rather stupid stuff that they watch. But he does watch a lot of things about animals, and he comes up with words and things that you think, no way a 7-year-old can come up with this. So
Oh
it's
man,
like, so there is a lot, like all things, to be honest. There's a lot of good, and it can be used for the bad as well, as we know. But just trying
exactly.
to monitor them, and it is the world in which we live.
Mm. I can't really get out of it unless we take the red pill like Neo. So I think that's the only way we
That's
can do
right.
it. I
Yeah.
mean, unless we're taking that pill. Oh,
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Let's talk with what's next in the life of Reverend Bradley Long. What's
Yeah.
the next
So
few months, year look like for you? What's going on?
yeah. So so we moved back to Norway just over a year ago, and that's been quite a big change for us as a family. Certainly, I've experienced what's called reverse culture shock, even though this is not my home country. So I've got that added dimension of readjustment back into the Norwegian culture. And for sure, I miss Israel very much. But it connects with what I want to do next. I want to do some work connected to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict,
Mm,
and so I've written a PhD proposal looking at reconciliation work between the two people groups, specifically with an idea of looking at NGOs, three NGOs that work within reconciliation, Christian NGOs. That's just to narrow it down for now, and looking at how they both what theories they use, what theologies that they employ, and what practice that they do working with reconciliation. So I'd just love to research that to see actually, well, obviously what their theoretical and theological premises, but how are they succeeding in reconciliation work. And it's, as we know, it's a conflict region that's been going on for at least over 100 years with no seemingly possible future at the moment. And so
mm,
it would be fascinating to see, are there these little pockets where there is some measure of success or moving towards reconciliation? That's possibly a more realistic picture, but that would be the nature of my research. So I've sent in an application. I've got another application to write beginning of January. So I'm really hoping that that will come to fruition to be what we call a research fellow.
mm.
So that's in. I can do my bit. That's in the good Lord's hand if that door is open. Otherwise, I will look at trying to serve in the church or in the local church here. And I'm just in negotiation with some theological faculties here to see how I can, what I need to do to work in the church here in the Norwegian context. So that's what's next for me.
Oh, exciting. And what's we'll have to have you on again after the PhD is or the paper is written. We'll have to have
Yeah,
you back on. That'll be
yeah. I'd
exciting.
be
And
happy to.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's even for myself as well, just as you mentioned, going back to not just Israel, but working with the conflict itself is
Mm,
from what I experienced is after you have an experience just within that dynamic, right? Neither you or I are Israeli or Palestinian, but we've been
mm,
in that area and we've learned enough, and there's some semblance that we have some of the tools that can help to some capacity.
mm,
And
mm,
I find it difficult to learn about something, be living with the people, you more than
mm,
myself, and seeing that, and then just thinking, ah, wow, this is really tough. Okay, I'm gonna go back to where I'm at. It's doable and it can happen, but there's sort of that longing to finish that business that was unfinished, and it may never be
mm.
finished. But like you said,
No,
the gap in the heart and finding that out. I feel
yeah,
always pulled back, so I resonate with you on that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, very good. Yeah,
Now, where can we got a few more here? Where can we find you? And I'm sure
yeah.
listeners are gonna love just your voice, your personality, and just the energy you brought.
Well, thank you. You know, my 15-year-old son says, "Dad, you've got to get yourself a YouTube
Oh,
channel up and running.
100%.
You love to teach and all this." It's like I'm so sorry that I've been so slow in getting going. So
Um,
where you find me, I'm still back in the realms of just emails at the moment. So I have no kind of web page up and running and podcast, but maybe Bruce and you'll be an inspiration for me, and
hey,
my
let's
son
do
for
it.
sure will be kind of, come on, Dad, you can do it.
Yeah,
You've got things to say, so get
we
out
do.
there.
Yeah.
And so I'm really sorry. So you're going to probably have to ask Bruce for my email address
I,
for now,
I'll put
and
the email
maybe
there for
next time
sure.
I'm back. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I'll put
next
the
time
email
I'm
there for
back, I'll
sure.
be.
Yeah, no, just a good way to connect and just seeing,
Yeah,
if there are questions or future, the paper you're
yeah,
going to write in the future, just ways to connect with that. I mean,
yeah.
also,
I am.
yeah,
Oh, sorry, Bruce.
no, no,
I
I don't
do
want to give
actually.
anyone.
I'm doing some online teaching with three different students, so that's really fun. So
Hmm,
I'm slowly but surely getting more up to date. So maybe that's another direction as well, more kind of general online teaching. Mm,
so powerful, and yeah, it's as we were talking in the nature to teach and just resonate and connect, And if anyone wants to make the trip out there, I'm not going to say what city you live in, but always go to Norway.
Oh, I said that. I'm in Oslo.
Oh, you are in Oslo. Wait, really?
Yeah.
Okay. I definitely
That's
didn't.
okay.
That went over my head. But in Oslo, which I mean, it's not a big city. I had the chance of going. As you remember, funny story. I went to Norway and Bradley saved me from freezing my body off. I was in Israel and I had no clothes for the cold. So I was in Israel, traveled to Norway, and this man saved me with proper
Oh yeah,
shoes.
the boots. That's right.
That was amazing. I mean, without you, look, it was still cold, but because that country is just freezing 24/7, just about. We're powerful.
Yeah,
Definitely,
definitely.
they'll be intense. So go visit Bradley in Norway and Oslo,
Okay.
and you'll all have a good time. Just the
Okay.
last two bits. This part, I just want to say, thank you for coming, of course, but more so the gratitude to just your overall mission and your desire for knowledge, your desire for different cultures,
Mm.
to find a way to bring them
Mm.
together, and really having not just a desire, but more so the pull, you would say, instead of the push to do
Yeah.
this, pull, because that's more
Yeah.
sustainable and more purpose
Mm.
driven, to go to these places, to learn these concepts, and to also be humble enough to acknowledge what you don't know and to be receptive of
Mm.
new information and to not accept it as absolute truth, but to learn from it and then apply it to what makes sense. So thank you for that because we need more of it.
Yeah.
It's valuable. It's
Yeah.
inspired me. Of course, thank you
Yeah.
for baptizing me. That's another story, but there's a lot of gratitude there.
Yeah,
To
that's fantastic. Well,
and
thanks
last
so,
one,
so much.
yeah, no, for sure. And just a question to really just wrap it up. So as you see on the bottom or on the podcast, I have a section just saying the nugget of wisdom to elevate
Mm.
like Zeus, right? So what does that mean? The concept of the show with
Mm.
Zeus with Bruce, Zeus, mythological character,
Mm.
but his rise from essentially being
Mm.
an outcast and trying to be destroyed by
Mm.
Kronos, his father, uh, finding his way to elevate and go through these challenges and persevere and become
Mm.
who he is in mythology, but still an influential figure.
Mm.
What would be if someone wanted to
Mm.
get to go through that process? What's a nugget of wisdom you could recommend
Mm.
that would leave listeners with a good piece to take away
Mm.
that they can implement or just think about after they
Mm.
finish this up?
I want to leave you with a paradox.
Mm,
And the paradox is this, and the Apostle Paul said it so simply. He said, when I am weak, then I am strong. When I am weak, then I am strong. And it's this idea of what I've tried to hint at through this talk is embracing our weakness, our failures, if you like, our weaknesses. And then when we're real with ourselves, and of course I would put the perspective of God in the picture, when we're real with ourselves, then I would say God is strong through us.
mm, mm. Something to think about, and the humility, and that's powerful. Bradley,
Mm.
thank you. Thank
Okay,
you.
guys, God
It's
bless
absolutely
you and God
incredible.
bless your listeners. All
What a
right.
way to kick it off. Yeah,
Okay.
we're gonna have this everywhere, and yeah, very powerful. I thank you for the vulnerability and said the gratitude before, but would love to do this again, especially when you have your own YouTube channel, or even not that channel, just a medium where you're continuing and
Mm.
able to exponentially increase the influence you have and the messages you have to share.
Thank you. Thanks
All
so, so
right,
much for
let's.
inviting me
I'm going to stop the
on your
recording, but
show.
we'll talk a little bit too. But all right, everyone, have a wonderful day, night,
Bye
and
now.
God
God
bless.
bless. Bye bye.
Okay.